John and I met in college. My name is Hannah. He was pleasant and humorous and ambitious, and we bonded right away. As soon as we graduated, we were married and began our lives together. I was ecstatic when our daughter Sophie was born. I raised her with all of my love and energy because I wanted to give her the finest possible start in life. I supported establishing limits and fostering discipline. Knowledge is power, I would constantly remind her. Study hard and you'll go far. John, however, approached parenting in a different way. He would buy Sophie sweets, show her off with presents, and allow her to get away with things that I wouldn't. He would reply, "Come on, Hannah, let her be a kid." Though I thought we balanced each other out, it troubled me. It became obvious to Sophie as she got older that she was a daddy's girl. When John got home from work, she would light up, laugh at his jokes, and go to him with all of her troubles. It was all eye rolls and "yes, Mom" in that adolescent tone with me. I would bite my tongue, telling myself that as Sophie grew up, she would get it. She would understand that my severe methods were motivated by love. Sophie, however, stayed solidly on her father's side, even at the age of 17. Though it hurt, I comforted myself with the idea that ultimately, I was being the proper person for her. In spite of these minor annoyances, I felt satisfied. I had fulfilling work at a reputable clinic, a laugh-loving husband, and a kid I loved to pieces, in spite of our differences. I felt that life was lovely. One clear fall day, everything changed. I was washing laundry, the same boring thing I had done a million times over. I touched a piece of paper with my fingertips when I was emptying John's coat pockets. Anticipating a supermarket receipt or a dry cleaning ticket, I took it out. Rather, I discovered myself gazing at a receipt from a high-end fragrance shop. I never used the pricey brand of perfume that was listed since it was too sweet and flowery. John understood that I liked my smells more subdued. I stood there with 1,000 options racing through my head while the washing machine hummed softly in the background. Was the present a surprise? But our anniversary was still months away, and my birthday had already passed. Was his mother the reason? She was, however, sensitive to most fragrances. I snapped a picture of the receipt with my phone while holding trembling hands, and then I gently put it back in his pocket. I wanted time to reflect and consider this information without making snap judgments. I looked over John's coat once more that evening while he was taking a shower. The receipt has vanished. I didn't say anything to John or Sophie about my discoveries. I kept it to myself. But now that I had opened my eyes, I was unable to resist taking in everything. It was as though a mist had lifted to expose a foreign world to me. While John had always worked late hours, they seemed different today. He would tell me, "Big project, honey," and give me a cheek kiss as he went. "Don't wait up." I would grin and nod, wondering who exactly he was meeting. I was also drawn to his new hairstyle. He had always been picky about how he looked, but this was younger and more fashionable. He dismissed my compliments with a shrug. Thought I'd try something new. The worst fishing expeditions were on the weekends. He would gather his belongings and go out to see his friends every other Saturday. "The fish are biting a lot these days," he would smile. As I watched him drive off, I used to wonder if he still had a fishing pole. I had not made these connections until I discovered that receipt. They now created an image that I was unable to ignore. It finally dawned on me what I'd been avoiding. John had a mistress. I attempted to brush it off. This was John, my John, the person who surprised me with flowers on Tuesdays at random, the man who held my hand during 20 hours of work. Though I couldn't shake the doubt he wouldn't cheat, I was unable to eat or sleep. I would lie awake at night, wondering whether John was dreaming about her while I listened to his steady breathing. I found myself surfing through Facebook one restless night. I noticed Mike Thompson's name. We had attended high school together, and from what I could recall, he had gone on to work as a private investigator. I messaged him before I could talk myself out of it. The next day, we met in a coffee shop across town. I inhaled deeply and revealed everything, including the receipt and my concerns about John's actions. Mike listened, his expression expressionless. It was Mike who accepted the case. I had a mixture of relief and terror as I watched him go. Answers would come to me soon, but did I truly want them? My life's toughest 3 weeks were those that followed. I went through the motions, assisting Sophie with her homework, grinning at my patients, and striking up a conversation with John over supper. But I was a wreck on the inside. I used to jump every time my phone chimed, assuming Mike had some exciting news. John would always come home late, and I would look for traces of remorse on his face. I would always worry if Sophie knew something that I didn't every time she brought up her dad. "You okay, Mom?" One evening, Sophie noticed me looking at the wall in blank stare. "You seem off." I forced a grin to appear. "Just worn out, my love. Many customers this week." Though she didn't appear persuaded, she dismissed it. I regret lying to her, but there was nothing I could say. "Your dad might be cheating on me, and I've hired someone to spy on him." John made up ground, and the item or person taking up his time didn't appear to notice. A part of me felt relieved, and another part of me was incensed that he could be so blind to my suffering. Tuesday afternoon, the call came through. My phone beeped when I was in between customers. My heart sprang into my throat as soon as Mike's name appeared on the screen. "Hannah, can we meet?" His tone was noncommittal, revealing nothing. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop in an hour. The rest of my appointments were a blur. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding at my clients while my mind raced. Mike was already there when I arrived, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. "Hannah," Mike pushed the envelope towards me. "It's all in here, photos, dates, locations." "I'm sorry, Hannah, but your suspicions were right." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. My John, with his arms around a younger woman. They were laughing, looking into each other's eyes with unmistakable affection. "Who is she?" I managed to choke out. "Alicia Benson," Mike replied. "She's 28, works at John's company. She's the director's daughter." I flipped through more photos. John and Alicia at restaurants, walking in the park, boarding a yacht. Each image was a fresh wound. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. Mike continued, "From what I've gathered, it's serious. They've talked about a future together." I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. Then a photo made me gasp. It showed John and Alicia at a cafe, but they weren't alone. Sitting with them, smiling and laughing, was Sophie. "No," I whispered. "It can't be." Mike's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, Hannah, but Sophie knows about the affair. She's met with them several times. Those weekends she said she was with friends. She was with them on Alicia's yacht. There's more. John and Alicia have been buying Sophie expensive gifts, designer clothes, jewelry. I think they're trying to buy her." Silence. I don't remember the drive home. Thankfully, the house was empty when I arrived. I moved on autopilot, packing a small suitcase with clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, couldn't face John or Sophie. I checked into a hotel across town, my mind still reeling. Once in my room, I called my boss at the clinic and took 2 weeks off, unpaid family emergency. I turned off my phone and sank onto the bed. The envelope seemed to mock me from the bedside table. Unable to help myself, I opened it again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damning photos. Sophie's smile as she hugged Alicia, John's arm around them both. My anger, which had started as a slow simmer, began to boil over. For years, I'd been the understanding one, the peacemaker, the one who bent over backward to keep everyone happy. Well, I was done with that. My eyes fell on my laptop. Without really thinking, I opened it and logged into my bank account. There it was, Sophie's college fund. I'd been squirreling away money for years, determined to give her the best education possible. It was my way of showing love, even when she pushed me away. Now looking at that balance, all I could think about was how Sophie had betrayed me, how she'd lied to my face, spent time with that woman, accepted her gifts. My daughter, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had stabbed me in the back. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Years ago, before Sophie was born, I dreamed of opening my own cosmetology office. But then life happened, marriage, a baby, mortgage payments. My dream got pushed aside. I stared at the account balance. It was enough to start over, to finally pursue my own dreams instead of everyone else's. You know what? I said out loud to the empty hotel room. Screw it. This money isn't for Sophie anymore. It's for me. The words hung in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had a future, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. Emotionally drained, I finally drifted off to sleep, my phone still turned off. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then reality came crashing back. With a deep breath, I turned on my phone. It immediately exploded with notifications, missed calls from John and Sophie, voicemails, text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Their concern, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like acid in my veins. How dare they pretend to care now? I didn't bother listening to the voicemails or reading the texts. Instead, I got dressed, packed my bag, and checked out of the hotel. It was time to face the music. The drive home felt surreal. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But I squashed that impulse. I needed closure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw John's car and Sophie's bike. They were both home. Good. I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. John and Sophie rushed out of the living room, their faces a mix of relief and anxiety. "Hannah, where have you been?" "We've been so worried," John exclaimed, moving to hug me. Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" "Why didn't you answer our calls?" I stepped back, avoiding John's embrace. A cold laugh escaped me, stopping them both in their tracks. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I tossed it on the coffee table, photos spilling out. John and Sophie stared at the images, their faces draining of color. There they were in glossy 8x10s, John with Alicia, Sophie with them both. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. John was the first to recover, his shock morphing into defensive anger. "Hannah, it's not what you think," he started, his voice pleading. "Alicia and I were just friends." "And Sophie," I interjected. "Don't you dare drag Sophie into your lies." I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Sophie jumped in, her eyes wide with fiend innocence. "Mom, please, I can explain. I only met her a few times. I didn't know." I held up a hand, silencing them both. "Save it. I know everything. The yacht trips, the expensive gifts, the dinners. Every lie, every betrayal." They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they realized their act wasn't working. The mask slipped away, revealing the strangers beneath. John's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. "Fine," he said coldly. You want the truth. Yes, I'm with Alicia. She's young, beautiful, and rich. She makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years. His words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I turned to Sophie, waiting for her contribution to this character assassination. She didn't disappoint. Alicia is amazing, Mom, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She's successful, stylish, fun, not strict and boring like you. I absorbed their words, each one a fresh wound, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I see, I said, my voice steady. Well, let me tell you both something. John, I want a divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact you. John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned to Sophie. And you, young lady, can forget about me paying for your college tuition. If Alicia is so amazing, maybe she can foot the bill. Sophie's jaw dropped. What? You can't do that. That's my money. I've been counting on it. I want to get into my dream school. You should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back, I replied, unmoved by her crocodile tears. Mom, please, she sobbed, her cool demeanor crumbling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me. I need that money. But her earlier words echoed in my mind. Strict, boring, worse than the other woman. Ignoring their protests, I went upstairs and packed the rest of my belongings. As I came back down, suitcase in hand, John blocked my path. Hannah, let's talk about this rationally, he said, his tone businesslike. The house, our assets. My lawyer will be in touch. I interrupted, pushing past him. I'm done talking to you. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I found a small apartment and threw myself into the logistics of dismantling a 20-year marriage. I hired a lawyer and requested a mediator, determined to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. The last thing I wanted was a drawn-out, messy court battle. Sophie called incessantly. At first, when I didn't pick up, she resorted to texts, then emails. Each message was a mix of apology and demand. I read each one, my heart breaking anew every time, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself staring at my phone, Sophie's number on the screen. My finger would hover over the call button, a war raging inside me. Part of me yearned to hear her voice, to believe her apologies. But then I'd remember her cruel words, her secret meetings with John and Alicia, and I'd put the phone down. Days turned into weeks. Each meeting with John was a test of endurance conducted in the sterile environment of our lawyers' offices. The man I once loved was now just another face across the conference table. All business and cold efficiency. One day, as I settled into my usual chair, the door opened, and Sophie walked in behind Jan. My heart clenched at the sight of her, but her expression stopped any warm feelings cold. She looked at me with a mixture of condescension and triumph that took my breath away. "Hello, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind me joining today." Before I could respond, she continued, "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be needing your pathetic money after all. Alicia has generously offered to pay for my education at any top college in the States." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "Oh, and I'll be living with Dad and Alicia from now on. We're going to be one big happy family." I felt the eyes of our lawyers and the mediator on me, waiting for my reaction, but I was too tired, too drained to feel much of anything anymore. I simply shrugged. "If that's what you want, Sophie," I said, my voice flat, "I hope you will be happy." Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment. Had she been hoping for a bigger reaction? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same smug look. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and asset division. In the end, Jan and I split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equally between us. With my share from the house sale and the money I'd saved for Sophie's college fund, I had enough to make a fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment, and after much soul-searching, decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job at the clinic and threw myself into creating a business plan for my own cosmetology office. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. All those years of experience, all the dreams I'd put on hold. It was time to put them to use. Weeks of planning, renovating, and nervous anticipation followed, but finally, Hannah's Beauty Haven opened its doors. Those first few months were a whirlwind of long hours, social media marketing blitzes, and the slow but steady growth of my client base. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's work was done, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Sophie's posts would appear on my feed, pictures of her in designer clothes, lounging on Alicia's yacht, always smiling, always looking carefree and happy. Each image was a knife to my heart. I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she missed me at all. When her 18th birthday rolled around, I sent her a message wishing her well. Same for her high school graduation. Both went unanswered. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My cosmetology office, once just a dream, was now a thriving reality. The steady stream of loyal clients from my clinic days, combined with a growing number of new faces, kept me busier than I'd ever been. I'd even hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up with a client, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. "Hannah, you won't believe what I just saw," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. I was at the Meadowbrook supermarket, you know, the one on the other side of town, and I swear I saw Sophie working at the checkout. My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie, are you sure?" "Positive." She looked different, thinner, tired, but it was definitely her. I thanked Sarah and hung up, my mind reeling. Sophie working at a supermarket? What about college? What about Alicia's promise to fund her education? That night, after closing the office, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Sophie's social media. What I found shocked me. All her glamorous photos with Jan and Alicia were gone. There were no updates, no college moving pictures, nothing. Her once active profile was a digital ghost town. For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to the supermarket to demand answers, but another part, the part still nursing the wounds of betrayal, held me back. Finally, on my day off, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the Meadowbrook supermarket, my heart pounding as I walked through the automatic doors. And there she was. Sophie, my baby girl, looking so different from the confident young woman who'd sneered at me in the lawyer's office. She was thin, almost gaunt, dark circles under her eyes, as she mechanically scanned items at the checkout. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of something: embarrassment, shame. Before I could decipher it, she looked away, her cheeks flushing. I approached her checkout, my steps hesitant. "Sophie," I said. She glanced up, then quickly back down at the register. "What do you want?" Her voice was harsh, defensive. "I'd like to talk. Maybe we could get coffee after your shift." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, still not meeting my eyes. "Please leave." She finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else. Was it fear? Stunned by her vehemence, I backed away. Other customers were starting to stare. With a heavy heart, I left the supermarket, climbing into my car with shaking hands. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had happened? Where were Jan and Alicia? Why wasn't Sophie in college? For days after, I waited for a call, a text, anything, but my phone remained stubbornly silent. I thought about going back to the supermarket, but Sophie's words rang in my ears. I don't want to talk to you. Just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I answered. Mom? Sophie's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. Can we meet? We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. As I waited, my mind raced with possibilities. When Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked so different from the glowing, confident girl in those yacht photos, so much older than her years. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. And then, like a dam breaking, the story poured out of her. At first, living with John and Alicia had been a dream. Designer clothes, yacht trips, promises of a bright future. But the honeymoon period didn't last. Alicia started making comments, Sophie said, her eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Little digs about how much space I took up, how expensive I was. Then she told Dad I couldn't live with them anymore, that there was no money for college. I gasped, but your father surely didn't agree. Sophie's bitter laugh was answer enough. He said I was an adult now, that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. They kicked me out, Mom. I had nowhere to go. Why didn't you call me? I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled away, tears in her eyes. I was so ashamed. And then I realized this must be how you felt when we betrayed you. I couldn't face you after that. My heart broke for her, even as a small, petty part of me whispered, good. Now she knows how it feels. I was sharing a crappy apartment with a coworker, Sophie continued. The supermarket job barely covers rent and food. I feel so useless. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Sophie, I said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you're right, you did betray me. Actions have consequences, and this is something you need to work through. We both cried then, mourning the lost year, the broken trust, the pain we'd caused each other. As we parted, something had shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. That night, I tossed and turned, Sophie's story playing on repeat in my mind. By morning, I made a decision. I called Sophie. I have a proposition for you, I said. I need an administrator at my office. The pay is not great, but it's better than the supermarket. And maybe we can start rebuilding from there. There was a long pause. Then yes, I'd like that. Thank you, Mom. It's been 6 months since that day. Sophie works at my office now, learning the business from the ground up. She's saving for community college, determined to make it on her own merit this time. Our relationship is a work in progress. There are good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. The trust we once had is slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt, one day at a time. As I watch Sophie greet a client with a warm smile, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're not the same people we were before. The betrayal, the divorce, the year of silence. But maybe, just maybe, we can be something new, something strong. Lily, $100 a month for groceries should be more than enough if you can't make that happen. We'll just call it quits. Matt's words hung in the air like a bad smell. I stared at him, feeling a cold disbelief wash over me. You've got to be kidding me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No joke, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug smile playing at his lips. Prove you're not that useless, Lily, or we're done. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. This was the man I'd married, my husband of 5 years. I took a deep breath, the anger coursing through me like wildfire. "Fine," I said, finally managing to speak. "I'll do it." Matt shrugged as if it were no big deal. "Good luck with that," he said, already turning his attention back to his laptop. I walked to the kitchen, his words echoing in my head. Useless. The man who used to praise my cooking, who loved every meal I put on our table, now reduced me to this. I grabbed a note and started jotting down meal ideas, my mind racing with determination. That night, as I lay in bed beside Matt, I stared at the ceiling. He was already asleep, completely unbothered by his cruel ultimatum. I replayed our conversation, every word a dagger to my heart, and something inside me shifted. This challenge wasn't just about groceries. It was a test of my worth, a value he'd callously questioned. I wasn't going to let him win. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the store with my notebook in hand. I had a list carefully planned out to stretch every dollar. As I walked through the aisles, I felt a strange mix of rage and resolve fueling my steps. "I'll show him," I muttered under my breath, reaching for the discounted vegetables. By the time I returned home, I was exhausted but determined. I pulled out my phone and started filming. "Hey everyone, it's Lily. Today, we're tackling an impossible challenge, a month's worth of groceries for $100. As I chopped and cooked, I felt the knot in my chest begin to ease. The camera became my confidant. I shared recipes, tips, and tricks, pouring my heart into every post. The notifications soon started to ping. Comments, likes, new followers, total strangers cheering me on in this absurd quest. When Matt walked into the kitchen that evening, I was plating dinner. "Smells good," he said, eyeing the meal with a rare hint of approval. I didn't answer. I was too fired up, too focused on proving him wrong through every flavorful bite. As days turned into weeks, my online community grew. Each meal I managed under the budget felt like a victory, not just over Matt's challenge, but over his belittling judgment. The more successful I became online, the more I realized how much I had let myself be defined by his cruel standards. And so, with each dish and every supportive comment from my newfound followers, I built my own fortress of resilience, one recipe at a time. It wasn't just about saving money anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth, about showing Matt, and more importantly, myself, that I was far from useless. Sitting at the kitchen table, I flipped through an old photo album. The early days with Matt. Smiles, laughter, shared dreams. My fingers traced our wedding picture, pausing as the memories flooded in. "It's hard to believe we were so happy once," I murmured to myself. Our first date had been at a small Italian restaurant. Matt had been charming, attentive, hanging on to my every word. "You have an amazing smile, Lily," he had said, eyes twinkling under the dim lights. "I really like you," I replied, shy but excited about the possibilities. Back then, he appreciated everything I did at home. "This lasagna is incredible, Lily. You spoil me," he'd say, wrapping me in a warm embrace. Those moments felt distant now, like scenes from a movie that had long since ended. I shook off the nostalgia and stared at my camera. My growing hobby on social media has become my refuge. Hey everyone, it's Lily again. Today, I'm sharing my favorite lasagna recipe. Affordable and delicious, I said, starting the recording. Cooking had always been my joy, and sharing it on social media was a way to reclaim a piece of myself. As I cooked, memories of Matt and me laughing in the kitchen played in my mind. He used to help me chop vegetables, sneaking kisses in between. But that laughter had been replaced by his cold eyes and harsh words. Scrolling through old photos, one caught my eye. A candid shot of me giggling as Matt tried to flip a pancake. The warmth of those days, the sincerity in his laughter, where had it gone? My phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. A notification. More followers, more support. Cooking for strangers who valued my tips more than Matt had in years felt strange yet rewarding. Each comment cheered me on. "You're amazing, Lily. These recipes save me so much." While my social media presence blossomed, Matt became more distant. He spent late hours at work, giving me a generic apology when he'd bothered to offer one. "Sorry, Lily, big project. You understand," he'd say dismissively, planting a kiss on my forehead before retreating to his phone. With cooking videos and the supportive online community, I found myself less concerned about Matt's coldness. I replied to comments like I was catching up with old friends. "Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the recipe." One afternoon, I set up my camera for another video when an idea struck me. I opened the fridge and checked its sparse contents. Let's make something amazing with what we've got. Watch how we turn these scraps into a feast, I declared, hitting record. It was both a challenge and a defiance against Matt's cruel test. That night, as I set the table with a humble but delicious dinner, I waited for Matt's reaction. "This looks good," he said grudgingly, eyes not meeting mine. The praise felt hollow, almost mocking. But inside, I knew I was more than his cruel words. With every dish I shared, with every follower gained, I rebuilt my confidence. Matt would come home later and later, and the man in those happy photos felt like a stranger. But I found solace in my own growth and the strength I never knew I had. We used to laugh together, dream together. Now our home was silent except for the click of my camera and the buzz of notifications. The world cheering on a woman determined to rise above betrayal. It started slow at first. Matt's missed dinners, the cold shoulder, the excuses wrapped in important business meetings. I would wait at the table, the meals I worked hard on growing cold. Frustration bubbled under my skin. One night, he walked in well past midnight, the scent of perfume lingering around him. I sat on the couch, the dim light from the TV casting shadows across his face. Late again, I noted aloud, not even trying to mask the bitterness. "Work, Lily, you know how it is." He replied curtly, not even offering an apology this time. I watched him walk to the bedroom, anger twisting in my gut. Resolute, I logged into my social media accounts instead. The numbers had climbed again, more followers, more engagement. People were genuinely interested in my recipes, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. "Hang in there. You're doing amazing, Lily," one follower commented, lifting my spirits in small yet meaningful ways. As Matt's absences grew more frequent, I threw myself deeper into my content. Each meal, each new recipe shared, became my silent rebellion. It was more than cooking, it was proof of my worth. I filmed everything, from budget-friendly gourmet meals to heartfelt kitchen hacks. The community's love and support started filling the void Matt left. "Hey guys, today we're making a $5 feast," I said into the camera, a determined smile on my face. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. Each new like and comment validated my efforts. But the doubts still nagged at me. One afternoon, as I chopped vegetables for a new video, I broached the subject that had been on my mind. As Matt walked in the door, I turned to face him. "Matt, have you thought about starting a family?" I asked, voice steady though my heart raced. He looked at me like I had just suggested the most ridiculous thing imaginable. "A family, Lily? We can barely manage as it is. What makes you think we're ready for that?" His words were sharp, cutting deeper than the knife in my hand. "Is it really about that, or are you just not interested? I pressed, needing to hear the truth. Don't start with this now. I'm too tired for your nonsense, he snapped, brushing past me. Again, the sting of his rejection settled deep. With Matt coming home less and less, the house felt empty. His coldness was a stark contrast to the warmth and excitement I found online. It became routine, his late nights my growing channel. I knew something wasn't right, but I also knew I needed more than his disdain. I kept filming and posting each video, a small victory. As my success started to translate into brand deals, I felt the tide turning. The nights Matt spent away fueled my drive. Despite the pain and isolation, I found comfort in the screen glow, a beacon of hope and validation. Little did Matt know, his neglect and cruelty were pushing me towards something stronger. His distance gave me room to grow, to prepare for what was coming next. With every new follower and every night spent alone, I found resilience I never knew I had. I was on the brink of uncovering Matt's true nature, and when I did, he'd see just how strong I had become. Another day, another challenge. This would be the third week since Matt dropped the bomb with his ultimatum. My spirits were oddly high. The $100 grocery budget had become my battlefield, and I was winning. I prowled the aisles, looking for deals, comparing prices. People might say it's impossible, but I've managed to stretch every dollar. I picked up a pack of chicken thighs, discounted and perfect for multiple meals. When I returned home, I set up my camera. Hey everyone, today we're making 3 meals out of this pack of chicken. Can we do it? Of course we can. I began filming with a confidence that felt almost strange, yet very real. As my audience cheered in the comments, Matt's absence became a dull ache. His late nights continued, his presence minimal. I moved around the kitchen like an artist in her studio. Every chop of the knife was a brushstroke against the canvas of betrayal he had painted. Matt stumbled through the door later that night. I was on the couch, answering messages from my followers. He walked into the kitchen, looking around for the meal I'd prepared. "Where's dinner?" he asked, his voice gruff from another night out. "In the fridge. I saved you a plate," I replied without looking up. He grumbled as he heated it up. "You know this budget thing isn't going to work forever," he said between bites, his tone laced with condescension. "Maybe not," I replied calmly, typing another response on my phone, "but I'm making it work now." At the end of the month, I reviewed our expenses. I had done it. I proved him wrong. I filmed a special video to mark the achievement. Hey everyone, guess what? We've completed an entire month on a $100 grocery budget. Thanks to all your support. My followers' encouraging comments poured in. Matt's reaction, however, was as heartless as ever. "So you did it. Big deal. Don't expect a medal," he said, tossing the statement carelessly over his shoulder. Frustration bubbled up, but I swallowed it down, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Instead, I poured all of it into my cooking. Every critique from Matt was met with another video, another shared recipe. The tension in the house was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Our conversations were limited to basics, a flimsy facade of normalcy. Meanwhile, my social media presence grew stronger each day. Fans eagerly awaited my posts, and engagement skyrocketed. One evening, while editing a new video, I heard Matt on the phone in the next room. His voice was low and secretive. "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow night, same place." I paused, the words hanging in the air. A cold realization began to form. It wasn't just work keeping him away. My hands shook as I continued editing, playing the dutiful wife while pieces of a darker puzzle slowly clicked into place. The $100 challenge had come and gone, but something far more challenging was on the horizon. But first, I needed proof. Proof that he was the vile and manipulative man I was beginning to see clearly. From that moment on, every step, every meal, every message to my followers became more than just a hobby. It was preparation for a showdown I knew was inevitable. And I would be ready. Mark my words, I would be ready. I was unloading groceries when I heard Matt's voice from the living room. He was on the phone again, talking in that hushed tone he'd adopted lately. "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow night." "Same place," he said with a disgusting smirk in his voice. "Meeting you is the only thing keeping me sane right now." My heart hammered in my chest. I crept closer, hiding behind the kitchen door. "Don't worry, Taylor. Friday night is ours." She thinks it's another late meeting. I felt the blood drain from my face. Matt was having an affair. My body moved on autopilot, arranging groceries while my mind raced. I needed proof. Later that night, lying next to the man betraying me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his deceit. But instead of falling apart, I felt a steely resolve harden within me. I reached out to my growing community online for the strength to follow through. The next day, I called a private investigator. "I need your help," I said, clutching the phone tight. "I think my husband is cheating on me." "Let's meet. I can discuss what we'll need to do," he responded, his voice firm yet kind. After our meeting, the investigator began his work. While he gathered evidence, I threw myself back into my cooking videos on social media. I smiled and shared, all while piecing together the destruction Matt was bringing into our lives. As I documented recipes, the investigator gave me regular updates. He's definitely involved with someone named Taylor. They've been meeting at the same hotel every Friday night, he informed me one evening. It stung, but I kept calm. "Thank you." "Keep digging," I replied, determination underscoring every word. The evidence piled up quickly. Photos of Matt with Taylor, incriminating text messages, receipts for lavish dinners and gifts. It was sickening. Each new piece of information was both a dagger to my heart and a nail in his coffin. On the Friday of their next rendezvous, I put on my dinner table smile as Matt prepared to leave. "Big project tonight?" I asked sweetly. "Yeah, don't wait up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Of course. Good luck," I replied, feigning innocence. Once he was gone, I sat down with the evidence, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, betrayal, and something else, relief. His demand for the $100 grocery budget, his absence, his coldness, it all made sense now. I stared at the pile of proof before me. The private investigator had even gathered videos of Matt laughing intimately with Taylor, looking at her the way he used to look at me. The anger simmered, but I held it back. The next morning, I confronted Matt, evidence spread out on the table. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. His face went pale, eyes widening as he took in the photos and texts. "It's not what it looks like," he started, but I cut him off. "Save it. I know everything about Taylor, about the money you've been wasting on this affair. You thought making me stretch $100 would distract me." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The shock, the guilt, the realization of what he'd done, it was all written on his face. "From now on, you're on your own," I said, packing the evidence into a folder. "I'll be talking to a lawyer. We're done, Matt." As I walked away, I felt lighter, stronger. Out of Matt's betrayal, I had found my own power. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The weight of what I'd uncovered gave me no rest. But today was different. Today wasn't about waiting. It was about action. As Matt stumbled into the kitchen, barely awake, He didn't even glance at me. "Where's my breakfast?" he growled, his usual demands cutting through the silence. I met his eyes with an icy stare. "You want something to eat." I tossed a crumpled $2 bill on the table. "Here's $2. Get yourself some cheap junk. Figure the rest out yourself." He froze, confusion and anger flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" "This is ridiculous," he protested. "Ridiculous. You think your affair is ridiculous. I know everything, Matt. Taylor, the hotels, the money you've wasted." I threw the folder of evidence onto the table, its contents spilling out. His face turned sickly pale. "Lily, I can explain," he pleaded. "No, you can't." I kept my voice firm, every word a blow to his crumbling facade. "You pushed me to prove my worth, you tested me. Now it's my turn." I watched him scramble to find words, any words. But there was nothing left to say. I reveled in the silence, then turned and walked away, leaving him amidst the evidence of his betrayal. Once I was out of the house, I called my lawyer. "I need to file for divorce, and I want to make sure he pays for what he's done," I told her. My lawyer, Sarah, didn't miss a beat. "Gather all financial records, any proof of infidelity, anything that shows misconduct. We'll make sure he gets what he deserves." Armed with her guidance and my newfound determination, I dove into preparing my case. At the same time, my social media following was buzzing. Subtly, I started sharing snippets of my story without mentioning Matt directly. Sometimes life throws challenges that test our strength. I posted alongside a photo of a simple yet elegant meal. The comments overflowed with support, my online community rallying around me in ways I'd never expected. Each day, I became more focused. Sarah and I met regularly, carefully piecing together the case that would ensure justice. Meanwhile, Matt's attempts at reconciliation became more desperate. "Lily, can we talk?" he pleaded one evening, blocking my path in the hallway. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, pushing past him with a cold stare. His workplace caught wind of his affair soon after. Whispers and side glances followed him in the office. Taylor, now exposed, tried to keep her distance, leaving him more alone than ever. As my cooking brand continued to rise, I felt the tide shifting. My focus wasn't revenge for its own sake. It was reclaiming my life, my worth. I plunged into new projects, developing recipes, and making plans for a future without Matt. On the day of our court hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Sarah by my side. Matt looked gaunt, defeated. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judgment was swift. He would pay dearly, financially through alimony, and socially as his reputation lay in tatters. As we exited the courtroom, Sarah turned to me, her smile filled with genuine warmth. "You did it," she said. I nodded, a weight lifting off my shoulders. This was just the beginning. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was the freedom from years of deceit and manipulation. But the journey wasn't over. Matt's world was only beginning to crumble. The first crack appeared when Taylor publicly distanced herself from him. "I can't be associated with this mess," she told him during their last clandestine meeting, which ironically wasn't so clandestine anymore. The private investigator had made sure those images surfaced at just the right time. Matt staggered into the house late that evening, a shadow of his former self. "Lily, please, can we talk?" His voice was strained, desperate. I glanced at him with detached indifference. "We have nothing left to discuss. You made sure of that." He tried to approach, but I stepped back, a barrier he couldn't cross. He was imploding, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a cold, distant satisfaction. That night, I posted a new video, my mind whirling with new ideas. Hey everyone, today's recipe is all about fresh starts and new beginnings. Let's make something amazing. The community's responses poured in, each comment a brick in the new foundation I was building. Meanwhile, Matt's downfall accelerated. News of his affair leaked to his boss, and the company couldn't risk the scandal. He was summoned to a meeting and returned home with a cardboard box filled with his desk remnants. I lost my job, Lily, he muttered helplessly, dropping the box by the door. Not my problem, I said, not even bothering to look up from my laptop. I was deep into planning my next online event, a cooking class live stream that was already attracting sponsors. Days turned into weeks, each one worse for Matt. Without his job, his income plummeted. The judgment from the court added a financial strain he couldn't handle alone. His so-called friends vanished, each slipping away to avoid the mess he had become. One evening, sipping coffee in my new favorite cafe, I received an email. My first cookbook was officially published and ready for pre-order. I could hardly contain my excitement. I shared the news with my followers, the comments overflowing with encouragement and pride. Returning home, I found Matt rummaging through old bills, his despair palpable. I don't know how to fix this, Lily, he said, tears brimming in his eyes. That's your mess to clean up, I replied coolly. You brought this on yourself. Watching him unravel was a stark reminder of the man he truly was. A man who tried to break me but ended up shattering himself. I felt a strange sense of closure. Moving forward, I immersed myself in new projects, cooking segments, sponsorship deals, and community events. Each success was mine alone, a testament to my resilience. Matt moved out a month later, defeated and broken. The house, now silent without his toxicity, became my sanctuary. I redecorated, shifting from old memories to new aspirations. From the ashes of betrayal, a stronger me had emerged. With my growing brand and supportive followers, I was ready to embrace a future untethered from the past. My story wasn't about revenge or loss anymore. It was about rebirth, a new chapter waiting to be written. The first morning in my new apartment was surreal. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the minimalist furniture I'd carefully chosen. The space felt fresh, free from the shadows of the past. I brewed a cup of coffee and took a deep breath. The air smelled like potential, like new beginnings. With my recipe book published and my social media thriving, today marked the start of something beautiful. I sat down at my kitchen counter, scrolling through messages from followers. Congratulations on the new book, Lily. Can't wait to try the recipes. Each comment felt like a step farther from my old life. As the day progressed, I finalized details for a cooking event, a live class that had drawn considerable interest. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a reminder that I was building something all on my own. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was a delivery. A bouquet of vibrant sunflowers with a note. To new beginnings, with love, your fans. I smiled, placing the flowers on the table. Their brightness mirrored my newfound optimism. Later, preparing for the live stream, I couldn't help but think of how far I'd come. The screen blinked to life, and hundreds of faces filled the grid, each one eager to learn from me. Welcome, everyone. Today we're making a special recipe from my new book. It's all about transformation, taking simple ingredients and turning them into something extraordinary. I began, the excitement in my voice matched by the enthusiasm in the comments. The interaction was electric, each step met with applause, each tip eagerly absorbed. I felt a deep connection, a shared journey of resilience and growth. By the end, the chat was filled with praise and gratitude. Thank you, Lily. You've inspired us so much, one comment said. No, thank you, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. You've all been my strength. After the class, I settled into the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on the path that led me here. The old life with Matt felt like a distant memory, a heavy coat I had finally shrugged off. A few days later, I heard through mutual friends that Matt was struggling. His new job was low-paying, and Taylor had left him after realizing he couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted. There was no satisfaction in his misery, only a reminder of what I'd escaped. I poured my energy into new projects, expanding my cooking brand, planning future books, and engaging more deeply with my online community. Each venture was a brick in the sturdy foundation of my new life. One evening, as I signed copies of my book at a local bookstore, a woman approached me. Lily, your journey has been so inspiring. You gave me the courage to leave my own toxic relationship. Her words touched me deeply. Thank you. It means the world to hear that we all have the strength to rebuild, even when it feels impossible. As I returned to my apartment that night, the city lights twinkling outside, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman's words lingered in my mind, solidifying my purpose. Revenge had given way to something much more fulfilling: empowerment, growth, and the unwavering belief that I could forge my own path. My past with Matt was a chapter closed, and I was ready to write the rest of my story, one filled with hope, resilience, and endless possibilities.
"Mom, we need to leave, now," I said, voice trembling. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, my heart pounding with a sense of dread that had become all too familiar. "Honestly, Claire, I can't deal with your nonsense right now," she sighed, not even glancing up from her magazine. "You're always overreacting about something." I swallowed hard, the dismissal stinging as it always did. From as far back as I could remember, I'd had these inexplicable gut feelings, warnings that would scream at me to avoid certain situations or people. More often than not, they proved to be accurate, like the time I insisted we leave a restaurant only for a horrific kitchen fire to break out minutes later. Or when I pleaded with Mom to take a different route home, and we narrowly missed a multi-car pileup. But instead of being praised for my intuition, I was labeled as a troublemaker, a jinx. My parents brushed off my concerns, chalking them up to an overactive imagination or attention-seeking behavior. The only one who seemed to understand was my little sister Julia, who would cling to me whenever I sensed danger, her big eyes wide with trust. That trust slowly eroded as we grew older. With each passing year, the rift between Julia and me widened, fueled by our parents' blatant favoritism. While I was constantly criticized for my oddness, Julia could do no wrong in their eyes. She was the golden child, showered with affection and opportunities that I could only dream of. "Claire, you're being ridiculous," Mom snapped, jolting me back to the present. "We're not going anywhere. Your sister has an important dance recital tonight, and we're not missing it because of your silly premonitions." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died on my lips. It was no use. They never listened, no matter how dire the situation. With a heavy heart, I retreated to my room, the feeling of dread growing stronger with every step. Little did I know, that night would be the beginning of a downward spiral, one that would test the limits of my family's loyalty and push me to the brink of losing everything, including myself. High school should have been a fresh start, a chance to shed the labels that had followed me for years. Instead, the neglect from my parents only intensified, and the chasm between Julia and me grew wider with each passing day. "Did you see Julia's new outfit?" Mom gushed one morning over breakfast. "She looks absolutely stunning." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the pang of jealousy that twisted my gut. Of course, they had splurged on yet another designer ensemble for their precious daughter. "And her dance recital is this weekend," Dad chimed in, beaming with pride. "We can't wait to see her perform." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. They couldn't care less about my activities or accomplishments. Not that I had many to speak of. My parents had made sure of that, constantly shooting down any interests or hobbies I tried to pursue. "What about you, Claire?" Mom asked, almost as an afterthought. "Anything exciting happening in your life? I opened my mouth, but the words died on my lips. What was the point? They would only dismiss or criticize whatever I said, as usual. No, nothing, I mumbled, staring down at my half-eaten breakfast. Julia shot me a smug grin from across the table, her perfect features twisted into a look of pure disdain. She knew she held all the power, basking in our parents' endless adoration while I withered in her shadow. The months ticked by and the pattern repeated itself endlessly. Julia blossomed into a popular, confident young woman, surrounded by a gaggle of admirers and drowning in praise from our parents. Meanwhile, I faded into the background, my warnings and concerns falling on deaf ears. "Claire, you're being ridiculous," Mom would scoff whenever I tried to voice my intuition. "Stop trying to rain on your sister's parade." The words cut deep, reinforcing the belief that I was nothing more than a jinx, a burden to be brushed aside. Even Julia started to treat me with disdain, rolling her eyes whenever I opened my mouth. "No one wants to hear your crazy theories, weirdo," she sneered one day, her friends giggling behind her. I bit my tongue, swallowing the hurt and anger that threatened to spill out. What was the point of fighting back? They had already made up their minds about me. As the years passed, the isolation became suffocating. I watched from the sidelines as Julia's star continued to rise, her every whim catered to by our doting parents. They were blind to her true nature, the vicious jealousy that simmered beneath her perfect facade. Little did they know that jealousy would soon boil over, igniting a chain of events that would tear our family apart and force me to confront the harsh realities I had spent so long trying to ignore. The day Julia got scouted by the prestigious Westbrook Dance Academy should have been a celebratory occasion, but as soon as I laid eyes on the slick-haired recruiter, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "This is such an amazing opportunity," Mom gushed, her eyes shining with pride. "Julia is going to be a star." "I don't know," I began, but Dad cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Don't start with your negativity, Claire," he snapped. "For once, can't you just be happy for your sister?" I bit my tongue, the familiar taste of bitter resignation flooding my mouth. Of course, they wouldn't listen to my concerns, not when it came to their golden child. Over the next few weeks, the feeling of dread only intensified. I couldn't shake the sense that something was off about Westbrook, that their promises of fame and fortune were too good to be true. "Julia, please be careful," I pleaded one night as she packed her dance bag. "I have a really bad feeling about this place." She whirled around, her eyes blazing with fury. "Shut up, Claire. You're just jealous that I actually have talent and a future unlike you." The words stung, but I pressed on, desperate to make her understand. "I'm serious. Those people seem shady, and I don't want you to get hurt." Julia let out a derisive laugh. "Oh my God, you're delusional. Stay out of my business, freak." With that, she stormed out, leaving me alone with my mounting sense of dread. Sure enough, my worst fears were realized. Within weeks, the truth about Westbrook began to unravel. They were nothing more than a glorified exploitation ring, luring in talented students with promises of stardom, only to bleed their families dry with exorbitant fees and shady contracts. "How could you let this happen?" Dad raged, his face contorted with anger. "You jinxed this opportunity for your sister." "I tried to warn you," I pleaded, my voice trembling, "but none of you would listen to me." Mom shook her head, her lips curled in disgust. "This is all your fault, Claire. If you hadn't been so negative and discouraging, none of this would have happened." The words cut deeper than any knife, reinforcing the belief that I was nothing more than a burden, a blight on their perfect family. As the financial strain mounted, the tension in our household became unbearable. Julia grew increasingly resentful, her once bright future now tarnished by the failures of Westbrook. "I hate you," she hissed one night, her eyes burning with rage. "You've ruined everything for me, just like you always do." I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her see reason, but deep down, I knew it was pointless. In their eyes, I would always be the problem, the one to blame for every misfortune that befell our family. As the walls closed in around me, I found myself retreating further and further into a world of isolation, my only solace, the knowledge that I had tried to prevent this catastrophe. But even that small comfort was overshadowed by the growing realization that my family's love and loyalty had limits, and I had long since exceeded them. As the walls of isolation closed in around me, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of Mrs. Reynolds, my English teacher. From the moment I stepped into her class, I sensed something different about her, a quiet understanding that seemed to radiate from her kind eyes. "Claire, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked one day after class, a warm smile playing across her lips. I nodded warily, bracing myself for yet another adult who would dismiss or belittle me. But Mrs. Reynolds surprised me. "I can't help but notice the way you carry yourself," she began, her voice gentle. "It's almost like you're shouldering a weight that no one else can see." My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I considered brushing her off like I had so many others. But there was something about her demeanor, something that made me want to trust her. "It's complicated," I finally said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have these feelings, these gut instincts that something bad is going to happen. And no matter how hard I try to warn people, they never listen." To my surprise, Mrs. Reynolds didn't laugh or roll her eyes. Instead, she nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I understand more than you know, Claire," she murmured. "You see, I have a similar gift, a heightened sense of empathy that allows me to read people's emotions and intentions." I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. Could it be possible that I wasn't alone, that there was someone else out there who understood what I was going through? Over the following weeks, Mrs. Reynolds became my mentor, guiding me through the intricacies of my abilities and helping me to embrace them as a strength rather than a curse. "Your intuition is a powerful tool," she explained one day, "but it's up to you to learn how to wield it wisely." With her guidance, I began to see the world through a new lens. The constant barrage of emotions and premonitions that had once overwhelmed me became manageable, even helpful. I started using my gift to assist friends and classmates, offering advice and warnings that were met with gratitude rather than scorn. "How did you know that Kyle was cheating on me?" my friend Sarah asked in amazement after I confronted her about her boyfriend's infidelity. "You're like a human lie detector." For the first time in my life, I felt seen and appreciated for who I truly was. The isolation that had once suffocated me began to fade, replaced by a newfound confidence and sense of purpose. But as my star rose, Julia's jealousy reached new heights. She sneered at my newfound popularity, her once adoring gaze now twisted with resentment. "Of course the freak would find a way to steal the spotlight," she spat one day, her words dripping with venom. I tried to reason with her, to explain that my abilities weren't a ploy for attention, but she wouldn't hear it. In her eyes, I was nothing more than a threat to her own fragile ego, a constant reminder of her failures and our parents' misplaced loyalty. As the tension between us escalated, I found myself caught in the crosshairs of a battle I never asked to be a part of. A battle for love, acceptance, and the right to be seen for who I truly was. Emboldened by Mrs. Reynolds' mentorship, I stepped out of the shadows and into a newfound confidence. No longer would I cower in fear of my abilities or allow others to dismiss them as mere delusions. "Claire, you have to help me," Sarah pleaded one day, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Kyle's been acting so strange lately, and I think he might be cheating on me." In the past, I would have hesitated, afraid of overstepping boundaries or being labeled a freak for voicing my suspicions. But now, I trusted my instincts implicitly. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," I said gently, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "But I've sensed something off about Kyle for a while now. His emotions towards you have shifted, and I don't think he's being faithful." Sarah's face crumpled, but she nodded, grateful for my honesty. Word of my unique insights spread quickly, and soon more and more of my classmates were seeking me out for guidance. "Claire, you have to tell me if Brad is serious about me or just stringing me along," Amanda begged, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I closed my eyes, tuning into the emotional currents that swirled around us. "He cares for you, Amanda," I said carefully, "but he's not ready for the level of commitment you're looking for." As the requests poured in, I found myself embracing a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time in my life, my abilities were being valued, not shunned or ridiculed. But not everyone was thrilled by my newfound popularity. Julia's jealousy reached a fever pitch, her once adoring gaze now twisted with resentment and bitterness. Of course, the freak would find a way to steal the spotlight. She sneered one day as I offered advice to a group of classmates. I tried to reason with her, to explain that my intentions were pure, but she wouldn't hear it. In her eyes, I was nothing more than a threat to her fragile ego, a constant reminder of her failures and our parents' misplaced loyalty. "You're just jealous that people actually appreciate me for once," I shot back, my own frustration boiling over. Julia's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, I thought she might strike me. Instead, she leaned in close, her voice dripping with venom. "Enjoy your little moment in the sun, Claire," she hissed, "because I'm going to make sure it doesn't last." From that day on, the battle lines were drawn. Julia made it her personal mission to undermine me at every turn, spreading rumors and lies in a desperate attempt to claw back the attention she so desperately craved. But for once, her efforts were futile. My newfound confidence was unshakable, bolstered by the knowledge that I was finally using my abilities to help those around me. As the tension between us reached a boiling point, I couldn't help but wonder if our toxic sibling rivalry would ever be resolved, or if it was destined to consume us both in a blaze of jealousy and resentment. "You seriously think you deserve a seat here, Claire?" Julia smirked as I took my place at the family table for her wedding reception. The venom in her voice sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to back down. Not this time. "Of course she does," Mom chided, though her tone lacked any real conviction. "She's part of the family." Julia let out a derisive laugh. "Barely. We all know you've never really accepted her gifts." She made air quotes with her perfectly manicured fingers. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Julia, this is outrageous. Leave your sister alone, or I'll have you removed from your own wedding." I whipped around to see none other than Mr. Anderson, the father of one of my closest friends, striding towards our table. His stern gaze swept over Julia and her new husband, Rick, leaving no doubt as to his distaste for their behavior. "Mr. Anderson," I stammered, equal parts relieved and mortified that he had witnessed Julia's cruelty. "You didn't have to." "Nonsense, Claire," he interrupted, his voice firm but kind. "I would be remiss if I didn't speak up in defense of someone who has done so much for my family and this community." Julia's face flushed a deep crimson, her carefully crafted facade of perfection cracking ever so slightly. Rick, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his bravado deflating like a punctured balloon. "What are you talking about?" Mom demanded, her eyes narrowing at Mr. Anderson. He smiled, seemingly unperturbed by her hostility. "Claire's unique abilities have been invaluable to my business ventures. Her insights and intuition have helped me navigate countless difficult decisions and partnerships, saving me from potential disasters time and time again." I felt a swell of pride in my chest, mixed with a twinge of guilt for not sharing these accomplishments with my family sooner. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have mattered. They were too blinded by their favoritism towards Julia to ever truly appreciate my gifts. "Is this true, Claire?" Dad asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. I nodded, holding Mr. Anderson's supportive gaze. "It is, but I never wanted to make a big deal out of it. I was just trying to help where I could." Julia's face twisted into an ugly sneer, her carefully curated mask of perfection shattering completely. "Of course," she spat, "always the martyr trying to make me look bad." "That's enough, Julia," Mr. Anderson said firmly. "Your pettiness and jealousy towards your sister have gone too far. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." With those words, he turned to address the assembled guests, his voice ringing out clear and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I have some disturbing news to share about the bride and groom." As Mr. Anderson proceeded to lay bare the sordid details of Rick's shady past and Julia's manipulative behavior, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication wash over me. For too long, I had been the scapegoat, the outcast forced to bear the brunt of my family's dysfunction. But in that moment, the tables had turned. Julia's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, exposing the ugly truth that had been festering beneath the surface for years. And as the gasps and murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd, I knew that this was only the beginning, the first step towards reclaiming my rightful place in a family that had long since abandoned me. As Mr. Anderson's damning revelations about Rick and Julia's sordid behavior echoed through the stunned silence of the reception hall, I could practically feel the weight of years of mistreatment and neglect lifting from my shoulders. Rick Thompson is nothing more than a con man preying on wealthy families like yours to fund his lavish lifestyle, Mr. Anderson declared, his voice ringing with righteous fury. And your daughter Julia was all too willing to be his accomplice, manipulating and deceiving everyone around her in pursuit of money and status. Julia's face had drained of all color, her perfect veneer cracking further with each word. Rick, meanwhile, seemed to shrink in on himself, the bravado he once exuded now replaced by a palpable sense of shame and fear. "You're lying!" Julia shrieked, her voice shrill with desperation. "Rick loves me, and we're going to be so happy together." Mr. Anderson fixed her with a withering stare. "Wake up, Julia. The only thing Rick loves is your family's money. He's been using you from the start, and you were too blinded by your own greed and desire for validation to see it." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a torrent of hushed whispers and pointed stares. For the first time in my life, the tables had turned. Julia was the one being ostracized, her carefully cultivated image of perfection crumbling before our very eyes. "And as for you," Mr. Anderson continued, turning his steely gaze towards my stunned parents, "you should be ashamed of yourselves for enabling Julia's behavior and alienating Claire in the process." Mom opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Anderson held up a hand, silencing her. "Don't bother denying it. I've seen firsthand how you've dismissed and belittled Claire's gifts, treating her like a pariah while showering Julia with endless praise and attention. Well, no more." He gestured towards me, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Claire is an extraordinary young woman whose talents and insights have helped countless people, myself included. She deserves to be celebrated, not shunned by her own family." As his words washed over me, I felt a surge of emotion. Gratitude, vindication, and yes, a twinge of petty satisfaction at seeing Julia's carefully constructed facade finally shattered beyond repair. For years, I had been the outcast, the black sheep forced to bear the brunt of my family's dysfunction and cruelty. But in that moment, the tides had turned, and it was Julia who found herself on the outside looking in, her mask of perfection stripped away to reveal the ugly truth beneath. As the stunned silence gave way to a cacophony of whispers and murmurs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Finally, after years of suffering in silence, the truth was laid bare for all to see, and Julia had no one to blame but herself. With a deep breath, I straightened my shoulders and held my head high, basking in the knowledge that my long journey towards redemption and acceptance was finally within reach. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would never again allow myself to be defined by the cruelty and pettiness of others. From this moment on, I would forge my own destiny, unburdened by the weight of my family's toxic legacy. The weight of the past fell away as I stepped out into the crisp morning air, my meager belongings tucked into a battered suitcase. The door closed behind me with a decisive click, severing the final ties to the toxic environment that had once been my home. As I made my way down the familiar street, I couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that had led me to this point. The years of neglect and emotional abuse at the hands of my own family, the constant dismissal of my gifts, the unbearable strain of living in Julia's shadow, it all seemed like a distant nightmare, one that I had finally awakened from. The events of Julia's disastrous wedding had been the catalyst, the tipping point that had finally forced me to confront the harsh realities I had spent so long trying to ignore. With Mr. Anderson's support and my newfound confidence, I had mustered the strength to break free from the toxic cycle of manipulation and cruelty that had defined my relationship with my family for far too long. The confrontation had been explosive, a maelstrom of bitter accusations and long-festering resentments finally unleashed. Julia, of course, had been utterly unrepentant, hurling vicious insults and denials even as the evidence of her misdeeds mounted. "You're just jealous that I'm the one who's actually successful and happy," she had spat, her perfect facade now shattered beyond repair. Mom and Dad, meanwhile, had retreated into a defensive silence, their blind loyalty to Julia rendering them incapable of acknowledging the truth that had been laid bare before them. In the end, it had been a lost cause, a family so poisoned by dysfunction and favoritism that they were beyond redemption. And so, with a heavy heart, I had made the decision to walk away, to forge my own path and leave the toxic remnants of my past behind. As I navigated the familiar streets, each step felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas waiting to be painted with new experiences and possibilities. A small smile tugged at my lips as I thought of Mrs. Reynolds, the woman who had seen my gifts for what they truly were. Not a curse, but a rare and precious talent to be nurtured and embraced. She had promised to help me find my footing, to connect me with others who understood the complexities of empathic abilities. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of belonging, of being seen and accepted for who I truly was. No longer would I be defined by the cruelty and pettiness of others, but by my own strength and resilience. As I turned the corner, the rising sun cast a warm glow over the city, bathing the world in a soft golden light. It felt like a fitting metaphor for the new chapter unfolding before me, a chance to step out of the shadows and into a future filled with potential and possibility. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and pressed onward, the past finally receding into the distance. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that I was ready to face them head-on, armed with the knowledge that I was no longer alone in this world. For the first time in my life, I was free to embrace my gifts, to forge my own destiny, and to leave the toxic legacy of my family behind once and for all.
My name is Julia Anderson. I've been married for 4 years and have a 2-year-old daughter. My husband works at a general hospital, and I thought we had a good relationship. But was I the only one who thought so? One day, while my husband was off to work, a woman stormed into the house. My daughter was out with her grandparents at an amusement park, and I was home alone. I had never seen this woman before, but she greeted me with a bright smile, and since she seemed nice, I thought it might be okay to let her into the house. As I made coffee and we started chatting casually, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "Please break up with him." Stunned by her sudden demand, I couldn't grasp what she meant. When I asked her to explain, she burst into tears. "I'm dating Ryan. I love him so much." Dating? You mean it's serious? Yes, I can't live without him. Please, let him be with me. I can't just agree to that suddenly. I had no idea he had a girlfriend. How could I know if that's true? I need to talk to him first. Please don't say that, just break up with him. It's not that simple to just break up. You mean you won't break up with him? Whether it was her overwhelming emotions or the fact that the conversation wasn't going her way, she attacked me, repeatedly striking my face with a coffee cup. Coffee splashed everywhere, staining the carpet, and I was increasingly covered in blood. I thought she was going to kill me. Just when I thought that, she seemed to snap back to reality, dropped the coffee cup on the floor, and left the house. As she walked out the front door, I rushed into my car and drove to the hospital where my husband worked. Despite the pain all over my body, I managed to get to the hospital and rasped out, "Please, call my husband." The nurse, shocked, replied, "There's no doctor by that name here," and took me to the examination room. I was asked something by the doctor, but all I could think about was that my husband was not there. My husband is Ryan Anderson. He should be in surgery. Even so, the response I got was, "There's no Dr. Anderson here. There never has been." What then? At that point, I passed out. It seemed I had a dream while unconscious. It was as if I was looking back on my life. My parents were wealthy, and I never had to worry about money as a child. After graduating from university, I worked as an employee. It was during that time, at a mixer thrown by a friend, that I met my husband. At the time, my husband was in his first year of residency, and his salary was very low. He would apologetically say he had no money when we went on dates. I was working, and if I ran out of pocket money, I could just ask my parents for more. So, I always paid for our dates. Sorry, I'll be able to cover the dates soon. Don't worry about it. I work, and money is not an issue for me. But years passed, and he remained poor. His parents were poor, and I couldn't even imagine their level of living. After we got married, he sent money to his parents every month. I suggested living together to ease their life, but he refused. No, my mom and dad like their house. Why? That house is quite old? For you maybe, but for my parents, it's a house of memories. They've lived there since their newlywed days. And that's where our family history is etched. In the end, my in-laws never moved from their old house. And most of my husband's salary went to them. I couldn't rely on his salary. Sorry, my parents are poor, so I have to give most of my salary to them. That means we really have little for ourselves. I never realized how strange it was. And I even felt proud of my husband for supporting his parents. When I told my parents about this, they were impressed by what a great person he was. So, I never doubted he was a wonderful person. But the truth was, life was hard, and for the first time, I experienced having no money. When I consulted with my parents, they decided to help out of love for their daughter. But telling my husband would hurt his pride. So out of consideration, I said nothing to him. I worked for him, pleaded to my parents for him, and did everything I could for him. I thought I was happy. Everything was for my husband. Yet, one day, a woman came and I was shattered. Completely, both body and soul. When I regained consciousness, I was apparently crying. The futon was wet, and tears streamed down my cheeks. I thought, was that a dream? It felt so real. It was like a dream telling me that my past self had been betrayed. If not for that, I might never have admitted to being betrayed. It was betrayal, that woman was his mistress, and I had been deceived all along. The worst. For 4 years. Even before we married, so 5 years. I have been deceived all along. He wasn't even working, so sending money to his parents was also a lie. I involved my parents and was just being used by him. And yet, I never realized it. I was a clown. The agony welled up, and I felt a pain in my chest as if being stabbed with needles. I could do nothing about this torment. My husband appeared, nonchalant as if nothing had happened. Why has it come to this? I couldn't sort out my feelings, let alone tell him the truth. If I did, our relationship would be over. Part of me wanted to break up, and part of me didn't. A stranger came by, and while we were talking, she hit me. Why would you let a stranger into our house? What about Emma? Was Emma okay? Emma was taken to the amusement park by her grandparents since the morning. I see, she was okay. Good. How are you doing? Can't you tell? You were hit? Just bruises? It's not just bruises. I wouldn't be hospitalized just for that. Is that so? I was hit on the head with a dish. You're a doctor, you should know how serious that is. Yes, that's right. Ah. I have patients waiting, so I must go. My husband, unable to answer, left the hospital room in a hurry. I thought, I knew it, he's not a doctor. Liar. As I lay in bed staring blankly at the ceiling, my parents walked in with my child. My mother, not expecting that her daughter would be hospitalized while they were at the amusement park, burst into tears as soon as she saw me. Julia. Poor thing. It must have been scary, right? Mom. What happened to make it come to this? What exactly happened? Ryan's woman came. What? What do you mean? Are you saying Ryan was cheating? Hey, why don't you take Emma to the shop or something? Ah, yes, that's a good idea. My father, sensing this was not a conversation for a young child, asked my mother to step out. Once my daughter and wife had left the room, I began to tell my father everything. She came out of nowhere and said she wanted me to break up with him. But I couldn't just do that, and I told her it wasn't that simple. Maybe she got angry because things didn't go her way. She suddenly started hitting me. And with a coffee cup, she hit me on the head. With a coffee cup? Yes. It seems my brain is okay, so I'll be fine. But I will need to stay in the hospital for a while. So, I'm asking you to take care of Emma. That's fine, but what are you going to do from now on? What will I do? Are you going to break up with Ryan? I don't know what to do. Dad, what should I do? If it were up to me, I'd want you to break up. He's put you in danger. And with that kind of woman involved, who knows what she could do to Emma? Ah, you're right. I should think about Emma. There have been too many lies. That's right. Thank you, Dad. I will get a divorce. Good, then leave the rest to me. It wouldn't be fun to just break up without making a point. Thinking deeply, my father said he was going to the shop and left the room. Until my discharge, my husband did not visit. And my parents and I steadily prepared for the divorce. As the day of my discharge approached, I was determined to get a divorce. Furthermore, I became increasingly resentful towards my husband, who hadn't visited even once and hadn't even asked about our daughter. Despite this, I decided to return home for now, but when I got there, my husband was nowhere to be found. Moreover, it was clear from how neat the house was that a woman had been there. I thought, unforgivable. He had a woman in this house. I gathered some personal belongings and returned to my parents' home. At night, I received a call from my husband. He must have known today was my discharge day. And yet, instead of coming to pick me up, he had not replied earlier. Now, he was calling to ask why I wasn't home. Julia, you were discharged today, right? That's right. Why aren't you at home? I'm at my parents' house. Why are you at your parents' house? I wonder why. It's not a matter of I wonder why, come back home. Do you have any idea how worried I am? Worried? If you were worried, you could have visited me in the hospital. How can you say you're worried when you only visited once? I was busy with work, I couldn't help it. Oh, really? Well, I'll be staying here for a while. What? Without saying anything further, I hung up the phone. Then my husband came flying over. Now of all times. When he arrived, he acted as if nothing had happened and started to talk about taking our daughter and going back home. But my parents wouldn't allow it. Julia has just been discharged from the hospital. What are you planning to make her do by immediately taking her back home? What? If you were a doctor, you'd understand what this means. But there's something we need to talk about, so sit down. Honey, please take care of Emma. Yes. My mother took my daughter to another room, while my husband's smile stiffened. It's scary how angry you look. What's going on with both of you? There's nothing funny here. In this situation, it's you who seems to be out of your mind for laughing. What do you mean, this situation? Do you even understand why I was hospitalized? Yeah, some unknown woman came in, right? The issue is who that woman is. Huh? If she's unknown, then she's unknown. She said she was your girlfriend. That's why she asked me to break up with you. Huh? That must be some misunderstanding. Do you think I'd get hurt like this over a misunderstanding? No, that's a mistake. That woman must be crazy. Why would I be with another woman? That's impossible. A crazy woman? Yeah, that's right. She must be a stalker or something. I've felt like I've been watched recently, so I was trying to keep you safe from harm. But I never imagined she'd do something like this. Are you serious about that? Of course. There's no way I could be cheating. Really? So, about being a doctor at the General Hospital, is that true? Of course. I'm a surgeon at the General Hospital. That's strange. The hospital you work at is the one I was admitted to, right? What? When I rushed in and asked them to call my husband, they said there was no doctor named Anderson. They said there never had been. What? My husband looked perplexed and tilted his head as if something was wrong. If you really are a doctor at that hospital, why didn't you show your face at all while I was admitted? Ah, I hadn't told you, but I was transferred from that general hospital to another one a bit further away. I couldn't visit because I was busy every day. I hardly even came home. That's also strange. The coffee cup that should have been on the floor, and the coffee stains that should have been on the carpet were all cleaned up. I thought it would be tough for you when you came back. So I cleaned that up myself. That's another lie, isn't it? It's not a lie. You lie as easily as you breathe. I'm telling you, it's not a lie. What's wrong? Did getting hit in the head mess you up? I was told at the hospital that there has never been a surgeon named Anderson there. That's just because the nurse you asked didn't know. Not everyone knows who I am. Even though you're both in surgery? Could that really happen? It's a big hospital. Then show me your medical license. What? I don't have that on me. You don't have it? That's right. I have something like a license, but it's too big to carry around. No, you're supposed to carry something like a license with you. What? Here, like this. My father showed his smartphone screen, and my husband froze and thought for a while. Then he said, that thing. I keep it safe at home because it would be terrible if I lost it. My father swiped the screen a few times. Then he showed the screen titled Medical Qualification Verification Search. It seems you're not there. That means you're a fake doctor. That must be just a registration error. What nonsense are you spouting? If it's a registration error, how can you work at a general hospital? Wouldn't the hospital check whether you're a real doctor? No. It really is a registration error. These things happen. Dad, aren't you unfamiliar with IT? After all, it's humans who do the registering. These things happen. How far will you go in denying it? Then tell me about the money you've been sending to your parents. I've been hearing all these great things, but perhaps that's a lie too? That's not true. It's all real. Is that so? I've had you investigated, and it turns out you attended school through correspondence for both high school and college. I was told it was a famous university's medical school, but it was completely different. a correspondence school that no one knows, and you were almost a shut-in. At some point, your mother, fed up with your inability to do anything, tried to make you work a part-time job, but that didn't go well either. Since then, you've given up on working. Though you said you worked, it lasted only about a week. Is that so? I was shocked by these new facts, and as I looked at my husband, his face turned from pale to red, like a traffic light. Your parents continued to work for your sake, and eventually, your father passed away from the stress. Yet, you refused to leave your room. Later, in place of your father, your mother worked desperately. But her income was low, and life became more difficult. Yet she worked hard, came home, cooked, and collapsed into bed every day. Even seeing your mother like that, you never changed, never left the house. At 25, thinking that you couldn't go on like this and would end up alone in the future, you decided you had to marry. You looked for a woman who would support you and attended a mixer. That's where you met Julia. You lied about being a doctor, deceived her, and succeeded in marrying her. How can you say such things? Even if you're my father-in-law, that's defamation. Then my father took out an envelope marked Detective Agency. This envelope contains an investigation report about you. Everything I've just said comes from that investigation. How can you say it's true? The investigation could be wrong. Even the most capable detective can't uncover every detail of a person's past. My father took out his smartphone again and tapped the screen. The voice that came from the phone was my mother-in-law's. That boy has never worked a day in his life. He got married, and it seems he's getting by somehow, so I'm finally relieved. Sending money home? Never happened. Not once since he got married. He's never worked, so it must be Julia's earnings that are keeping them going. There'd be no way to send money home. Stop it. Detectives might not know your past, but surely your own parents would? I've heard a lot, and they told me just what the detectives did. And that there has never been any money sent home. Wow, I was surprised. You've deceived not only Julia and us, but even your own parents. My husband turned pale and trembled. It seemed like a complete knockout, but my father did not ease up on him. Now, shall we get to the main point? The main point? It seems you have a mistress, not a stalker. No, that's not true. She's a stalker. No matter how much you insist, it's useless. It's all written in the investigation report. Surely, she must be in cahoots with the detective. Is that so? Then how will you explain this? My father pulled several photos from the envelope. They showed the woman who hit me walking arm in arm with my husband. Both of them coming out of a hotel. And the two of them looking outside from the woman's apartment. There were too many scenes just like these. How will you explain this evidence? That woman is crazy. She kept coming on to me persistently. So, I promised Julia I wouldn't get close to her. And was just trying to keep the woman appeased. Is that so? The only person I love is Julia. Ignoring my husband's desperate attempts to explain, my father stood up and opened the door to the next room. Out came Michelle, the mistress who had hit me. Ah. Michelle. Why are you here? Why? Why are you here? You said we were going to get married, right? Yet, you call me a stalker? You always said your love for your wife was fading. And that you wanted to get back together? No, You said you were a doctor, that you were a resident with no money, right? That your wife took all your salary, so you had no money. That's why I've been helping you out with what little salary I get. And yet, you weren't even a doctor, nor did you have any intention of leaving your wife. I believed you and confronted your wife. That's going too far. If I hadn't done that, I'd still be deceived by you. Michelle, do you really want to marry this man? Of course. I've been with him for a long time and decided to live for him. No, it's not true. I never intended to leave Julia. How cruel. You don't want to leave your wife? So everything you told me was a lie? No, it wasn't a lie. I was serious about that. But it's also true that I don't want to leave my wife. That's unacceptable. I even gave you pocket money. You said you'd pay me back once your residency was over and your salary increased. You asked me to bear with it for now. That's true, but if being a doctor was a lie, how were you planning to pay me back? Well, I thought Michelle would understand. Understand what? Maybe if I said I got fired as a doctor, it would somehow work out. So you were planning to deceive me again? Continue to be with me as a mistress while staying married to your wife? Don't think of it that way. It's better if we just enjoy our time together without thinking about marriage. I wanted to get married. I wanted to be your wife. Marrying you means divorcing Julia. Doing that would mean I can't access Julia's inheritance. She's a wealthy heiress. Staying married to her is much more profitable than marrying you. Ah, I see. So that's why you married Julia, with all those lies. The worst. To think it was all for my father's inheritance from the start. No, that's not it. It's just sophistry to convince Michelle. Sophistry? So you do prefer your wife over me? Michelle, let me ask you again. Even now, do you still want to marry this man? Of course. No matter how many times you ask, my feelings won't change. Well, that's good to hear. Then here's the divorce paper. Julia, Ryan, sign it. What? No, I don't want a divorce. Whether you sign it now or later, it'll happen. I can hire a lawyer. This is. I picked up the pen and wrote down my name. Now it's your turn. My father placed the divorce paper in front of my husband. And although he resisted, he agreed to the divorce. Now, this is next. The marriage certificate. Even if you submit the divorce paper, you can't submit the marriage certificate right away. You have to wait until the divorce is recognized. That's about 2 weeks. But if I let you two write the marriage certificate after becoming a couple, this man might not write it. So, sign now. This is. You've already signed the divorce paper. No matter how much you resist, the result will be the same. With trembling hands, my husband signed the marriage certificate. And Michelle signed it happily. Now you two are married. Congratulations. What a situation. I was managing everything so well until now. From now on, you are mine alone. Ryan, I will be claiming compensation and child support. What? But I don't have any money. Whether you have money or not, it's only natural to claim it. After all, you had a mistress. It costs money to raise Emma. That's not fair, Father. Aren't you wealthy? You have more than enough, even without taking from a poor man like me. That's a different matter. If you don't have money, borrow it and pay in full. In full. How much will it be? Emma is only 2 years old. You'll pay until Emma graduates from university. For the next 20 years, pay $500 each month. You can calculate how much that will be. How am I supposed to borrow that much? I'm unemployed. Who would lend to me? There are plenty of places that will lend to you. Borrowing isn't only about going through reputable sources. That's something for you as a couple to figure out. And Michelle, be prepared because I'll be billing you too. Yes. Since I'm getting married, I'll pay properly. What should I do? Michelle, you pay my share. Ryan, if you have debts, you have to work. Maybe this will finally motivate you to start working. Then you can live a human life. That's right. Michelle, you're something else. Maybe you're better for this man than anyone. Ryan, this might be your last chance for rehabilitation. Work hard and pay it back. But I don't want to work. Well, that's the end of it. You can go home now. No, there's still more. What about the division of assets? The house and car. And other household appliances. I'm entitled to half. You've hardly contributed to the living expenses all this time. The little you did contribute sometimes was money you received from Michelle, wasn't it? You think you could buy a house or car under those circumstances? Everything was bought with money my father helped us with. So the house and the car are my father's. There's nothing for you. That's ridiculous. What about clothes, suits, shoes? Those were also bought by my father, so I'll have them disposed of. Why even those? Just buy them again. It's not a joke, you know. Some of those suits cost thousands of dollars. Give it up. It's your fault for not working. Besides, you've been lying all along. Now you'll have to straighten up for her. Ah, what a situation. Don't worry, I'm here for you. I'll support you so you can work properly. But I won't let you cheat ever again. Michelle said this with a creepy smile. Ryan, oblivious to Michelle's demeanor, was slumped in shock. Later, Ryan moved into the apartment where his mistress lived, but was unable to borrow money as he had hoped. So, Michelle borrowed the money in her name and paid it off in one go. But this was the beginning of hell for him. Michelle, who had always been kind no matter what, revealed an unbelievable true nature. She whipped Ryan into shape for not doing anything around the house, arguing that a man who can't handle household chores couldn't possibly work. While teaching him every household task, she made him look for work. If Ryan didn't move as Michelle wanted, she wouldn't let him eat properly that day. He who does not work, neither shall he eat. That was her principle. Once Ryan finally found a part-time job, Michelle quit her job. Her reason was that she couldn't be sure if he was really working. So she drove him to and from work. Indeed, while saying he was going to work, he might have been messing around with another woman. She never took her eyes off Ryan for a minute, and he was deprived of any freedom. Moreover, she didn't give him any pocket money, and when he went to work, he had to bring a water bottle and a hot dog. The hot dog also had a red heart drawn over the sausage to mark Michelle's presence. Thanks to that, they are managing to make the monthly payments. So it's all thanks to Michelle. However, Ryan has become quite thin and seems to have lost his sanity. Meanwhile, I returned to my parents' house and am living happily with my parents and child. Recently, I've been helping with my father's work, making my social debut and enjoying every day.